Hello, I'm Hazem Seeker. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, a technocrat and the de facto leader of OPEC has been ousted. But will his replacement as Saudi Arabia's energy minister fare any better as the kingdom struggles to get more for its oil? The cost of adapting to climate change. If you think businesses haven't already failed because our planet is heating up, think again. And Trump's never-ending trade war with China has opened up opportunities for some Thai businesses among the chaos. He was the de facto leader of OPEC and the most respected oil man in Saudi Arabia and on the world stage. So well respected that when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman needed to salvage his credibility after the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, it was Energy Minister Khalid al-Falih who he turned to. But in a surprise move, he was ousted and replaced by Mohammed's half-brother, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman. It is the first time a member of the ruling Saud family has been appointed to the post. Technocrats like Falih have always been the nation's choice to run the oil ministry. He was also relieved from his role as chairman of the oil giant Aramco. Saudi Arabia has a 13% share of the world's petroleum market. And during Falih's tenure, he struggled to raise the price of oil to $80 a barrel. That price would give Mohammed bin Salman the financial firepower to transform the economy, moving it away from its oil addiction. It would also enable it to balance its budget and not exhaust foreign reserves on imports. Well, this is how crucial oil is to Saudi Arabia. Oil accounts for 40% of its economy, 70% of government revenue, and nearly 80% of export earnings. According to Reuters, Saudi export earnings from oil fell from more than $800 million a day in April 2014 to less than $300 million a day in February 2016. That was due to the shale oil boom in the United States. And as of June this year, it was earning $400 million a day. Now, Saudi Arabia has used everything in its policy toolbox to raise prices. Falih elicited the help of Russia and other non-OPEC nations to cut production. Saudi Arabia cut its own production to its lowest level in 5 years to no avail. It also needs high oil prices to meet the ambitious $2 trillion valuation for Saudi Aramco's stock market listing early next year. At the moment, analysts believe the world's most profitable company is worth between $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. But Mohammed bin Salman wants a higher valuation, and on that count, Falih also failed to deliver. Well, let's find out what's behind the decision, and can the new man do any better? Well, to help us answer those questions, I'm joined by Richard Mallison, a co-founder of Energy Aspects, a senior energy analyst there. Thanks very much for being with us. So what's behind this move then to get rid of al-Falih?
Well, I think it's hard to see it as anything other than a loss of confidence in his ability to handle some of his portfolio. And I think that's probably primarily about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's very central, obviously, to all decision-making in the kingdom, losing that personal confidence that he's the right man for the job.
And was that also about the failure to deliver high oil prices? Because Saudi Arabia needs to be at a certain price to deliver its budget.
I think it's a bit simplistic to just say that Saudi Arabia needs a particular budget. Clearly, it's run a deficit budget for a number of years. It can do that, but there are downsides. And Saudi Arabia has ambitious investment plans, Vision 2030, and other areas. And so I think certainly the slow progress, as probably the Saudis would see it, towards achieving a more balanced market and the price increases they'd expect to come with that is going to be a big part of what's driven this change.
And does this as well change the relationship with OPEC Plus, in particular with Russia? It was for the contaminated oil shipped to Europe, Russia. Would that not be in compliance with its commitment to cut production?
It's a good question. Clearly, al-Falih was very active and involved in the engagement with Russia and the other OPEC Plus members. But I think that Saudi-Russian cooperation goes to a much higher political level. So we saw a lot of links between the Crown Prince and President Putin on the Russian side. And I think that engagement is going to outlast the departure of al-Falih. I think really what we're looking at is an alignment of interests for Saudi Arabia and Russia, certainly as far as the cooperation agreement. It's not a perfectly easy partnership. There will be strains down the line and it may not last forever. But I think for now, at least, both countries are looking at having similar interests and seeing the benefits of working together, and that will remain the case.
And we mentioned as well the break with precedent in making this appointment. Why is the House of Saud seemingly keen on controlling the energy ministry? Because that's something they've avoided in the past.
Well, I think it's possible to read too much into the fact that the new minister is a member of the royal family, because when you look at his background, he spent several decades as a deputy and other oil minister. He's very, very deeply involved in this industry. He's very experienced. I think he's perceived both within the kingdom and, they will hope, by the oil markets as a safe pair of hands and an experienced person when it comes to oil markets. So I think the fact that he's a prince, and the fact that he's a half-brother of the crown prince isn't the relevant factor here. It's much more that he is knowledgeable about the portfolio, and he's seen as someone who won't rock the boat when it comes to policy.
But he's inheriting the same low oil prices, so what can he possibly do that hasn't been done before?
I think that's absolutely true, and that's why I don't think we're going to see a dramatically different policy. I think we may see a different style of communication, perhaps, maybe a move back towards an approach that we saw in the past from Saudi Arabia, where there was less talk, there was less comment to the press, there was a narrower focus on a message that the kingdom wants to communicate to oil markets. And I think what we've seen, particularly in recent months, is a more proactive style that hasn't really had the desired results. So really trying to talk prices up at times, and we just haven't seen prices react in the way that probably was intended in Riyadh. So I think a move back to a quieter form of communication, but not a shift in the underlying oil policy.
So will this help the Crown Prince's move to float Aramco then?
Well, I think the change of oil minister won't be very significant, but actually one of the changes that occurred just beforehand, the change of chairmanship of Aramco, does signal a renewed effort to push forward with the IPO. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is reports that IPO will probably begin with a domestic listing, which will be easier to achieve, fewer barriers, fewer regulatory requirements. So it seems very clear that push to make the IPO happen and happen sooner rather than later is ongoing. The real question for the Crown Prince, of course, is at what price will that listing happen? And that is very tied up with the oil price. And because I don't think this new energy minister can deliver a miraculously higher oil price anytime soon, we may still not see that IPO happening at the levels that the Crown Prince would ideally want.
Richard Mallinson, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
Well, earlier this year, the California-based utility Pacific Gas and Electric filed for bankruptcy protection as costs related to wildfires ballooned. It was probably one of the clearest cases of how climate change wiped out a company that hadn't done enough to prepare for a warming planet. PG&E faced approximately $30 billion in liabilities as a result of its role in the 2017 and 2018 fires. State investigators linked 100 deaths to the fires. The federal judge, William Alsop, blamed the cause of some of the fires on the utility's negligence. The judge also said the utility paid $4.5 billion to shareholders in dividends over the past 5 years while failing to take adequate safety precautions. Germany's car industry is facing up to the threat of losing its crown as the leading center for production. A series of missteps, from diesel cheating scandals to the lack of preparedness for the end of the combustion engine, has left the road open to Uber, Tesla, and Chinese electric brands. An industry that employs more than 800,000 people is facing a make-or-break moment. Both cases raise many questions. Are businesses doing enough to prepare for climate change, or do executives have their heads in the sand? According to the Global Commission on Adaptation, businesses need to plan more for a warming planet. Companies that do not adapt may not survive. It claims investing $1.8 trillion to climate-proof businesses and the broader economy by 2030 could generate $7.1 trillion in net benefits. Half the world's biggest companies believe climate adaptation could result in $236 billion in increased revenue. Economists have long argued that putting a price on greenhouse emissions is the fastest way for business to make changes. Nearly 4,000 firms with revenue of about $7 trillion already participate in some form of carbon pricing. And one of the authors of that report is Feike Sijbesma, Chief Executive of Dutch life sciences company Royal DSM. Our economics editor Abid Ali caught up with him and began by asking what signal was being sent to businesses with the lack of political will from the likes of President Trump, who withdrew from the Paris Climate Change Accord.
Well, not everybody, as I said, is making the right step up in terms of climate mitigation. And we should, because we have agreed as 200 nations in Paris in 2015. But I think all countries in the world, whether you step up on climate mitigation or not, need to protect your own people, your own business, the most vulnerable in the world. So every nation, every company in the world need to step up on climate adaptation in your own interest. And I think we need to do 4 things especially. First of all, create more transparency on how climate risks are influencing you as a country, and every country is exposed, or you as a business in terms of your supply chain, in terms of your locations, or whatever. Transparency. And also for investors, that is very important. Secondly, you need to protect your own operations, taking care of your own supply chain if you talk about food and agricultural products, or flooding of your sites, or droughts that your workers cannot come to your sites. Thirdly, you need to focus on innovation, trying to develop new products, new solutions. And as a company, you can make money, and as society, you're served by those innovations. We, for example, make the oceans more resilient for fishing. We make agriculture in Africa more resilient to that. And the 4th element is advocacy, to advocate for climate mitigation as well as adaptation. And I think there is no country in the world who can escape from that.
You mentioned investors in your examples that you just gave there. For too long, businesses have been run for shareholders and to make bosses richer. So how are you going to make this transformation now to say, you know, the environment is very important as well?
Well, there is no company who can be successful in a world that fails. At the end of the day, that will hurt you as a company. The economy was never invented to make money. Money is a tool to all live happily here all together. And the world is threatened. Inequality, hunger, climate change, refugees, etc. So therefore, it's in the interest of business itself, therefore it's in the interest of the economic system, the resilience of our economic system, to go for more value creation than only shareholder value creation, but also for society, your customers, your employees, etc. And I think more and more companies see that. You see the Business Roundtable in the United States, 180 companies, 180 CEOs a few weeks ago said, hey, there are more stakeholders than only the shareholders. And of course, as companies, we are not philanthropic organizations. We need to make money. But there are more interests than only making money. And there's more interest than only the short term. And addressing climate change via mitigation and addressing adaptation is in the interest of all countries, is in the interest of all companies, just to future-proof your business. And investors should be interested in how companies are exposed and what companies are doing to keep the business up also in the long run.
Just looking at the world around you right this very moment in time, the global economy is slowing, and there's a trade war going on between the United States and China, which is having an impact on a lot of other countries. How is it affecting you? How is it affecting the world? What's your opinion as to what's going on?
Well, let's have a look to what's happening in the world with all the trade issues or the geopolitical tension. I think if we look back a little bit, globalization is an essential part of our economic system. Basically, our economic system is based on specialization. You are better in this, I'm better in another thing, and let's exchange at the end of the day. That is the essence of our economic system. Trade, specialization. And globalization brought prosperity for many countries in the world, for billions of people. But not for all countries and not for all people in all countries. And what we need to do now is not put fences around countries or businesses, but making globalization more inclusive for all. That is the way to go. Because globalization is, I think, the essence of our economy, because it is based on the specialization model. And you see a little bit at this moment that people try to put fences around things. I see that as a temporary movement. We as a company, because we are especially in food, are not so much hurt by that at this very moment, but it's not a good thing and it is not the right reaction on a correct observation that globalization did not bring prosperity for all. Make it more inclusive.
That was Feke Sebesma talking to our economics editor. Well, as we mentioned, one industry that is facing the challenge of adapting to climate change is the auto industry. Germany's BMW has been one of the earlier movers in producing electric cars. It currently stands number 4 behind Tesla and 2 Chinese companies in terms of sales. Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane spoke with the BMW board member Peter Notter at the Frankfurt Motor Show.
Mr. Notter, looking at this motor show and indeed looking at the motor vehicles we can see here, does your company see a generational shift in the way that young people perceive the motor industry and motor vehicles and what they're used for?
Well, one of the biggest changes is that younger consumers really value new and different elements of a vehicle, like connectivity in and around the car, the way they can integrate seamlessly their digital life into the car. And it's good at the BMW Group, we are really leading the pack there with our connected drive. So that is something we also see a lot of awards that we win as a brand for that. At the same time, young consumers are also more open for example, sharing concepts. And with our Drive Now concept, for example, we have set the tone there as well. And now in our cooperation in the joint venture with Daimler, we are continuing that.
A few years ago, people spoke about hybrid vehicles as being the future, and yet now more and more companies are saying, no, electric is the way to go. Totally electric. To use the German phrase, they want to move away from Verbrenner, from fossil fuel burning vehicles, towards electric. BMW appears to be going that way. Why?
At the BMW Group, we very much believe in what we call the power of choice. So we actually deliver various drivetrains to our customers depending on their needs, because we believe that true impact as a positive impact on climate change will only be delivered if customers want and use these products. And that can differ from country to country, from use case to use case. So in urban areas, a battery-powered electric vehicle might be the solution. We have great solutions there with our BMW i3, with our Mini Electric, and next year also with our BMW iX3, a fully electric version of our most popular BMW X3. But we also offer plug-in hybrids. We've electrified with plug-in hybrids almost our entire range from the 2 Series all the way up to our top model 7 Series. For customers that actually drive longer distances and want to be able to drive electric in an urban area, in a city, but also want to have the ease of mind with an efficient combustion engine to drive longer distances. We are also working on new technologies towards the future. We show here in Frankfurt our BMW i Hydrogen next with fuel cell technology.
So you feel that your company is ready for climate change and can actually make a difference, as it were?
Absolutely. So we believe in the power of choice. So it's a true customer-centric attitude. We deliver what the customer wants and can use, and with that we will have the biggest positive impact on climate change.
And looking at another global factor these days, the trade war. Is the trade war hurting your sales, hurting the automotive industry's sales?
Well, of course, as a BMW Group, we are a global operator. We very much favor frictionless trade, also free trade without tariffs. but we have a very global production network. We have our biggest plant in Spartanburg in the US, in South Carolina, but we also have production here in Europe and also in China. So we are well set up also for a world where there might not always be frictionless trade. But of course we wish for and call upon governments to enable frictionless trade because we believe that creates most value for our customers as well.
Speaking of frictionless trade, one issue right now which is dominating the debate, it seems, in the United Kingdom, but also to a certain extent in the EU, is Brexit. What do you see? Many people in the UK had always said, oh well, German car makers will still want to sell their products. Is that really a factor for BMW, for other German car makers?
Well, at the BMW Group we are very much committed to the UK as an important market to sell our great cars, but also it's the home of two of our fascinating brands, Mini and Rolls-Royce. So we're committed to the UK. We produce Mini in Oxford. We recently launched our Mini Electric to be produced in Oxford starting this November. But we call on the politicians to make an end to this period of uncertainty, because uncertainty is not good for business, and to enable further successful production from Oxford we need clarity, and also we wish for a situation where there is frictionless trade across the channel.
And what does that mean for jobs? Because certainly the other German car manufacturers, so for example Volkswagen, have concerns that shifting towards electric cars and the production of electric cars might not necessarily mean the end of many jobs, but it might threaten jobs. Are you confident that with all the things that your company has in place, that jobs are secure?
Well, there might be a shift in the type of jobs that will be needed towards the future. Also in electrification further gains ground, but we will also create jobs in other areas. We talked about connectivity in and around the car, so we already have thousands of highly skilled software engineers within the BMW Group that are important to deliver on those customer needs.
Peter Nutter from BMW Management Board, thank you very much.
Now, President Trump has delayed by 2 weeks a planned tariff on some Chinese goods after Beijing decided to exempt some US cancer drugs and other goods from new levies. Trump said he'd like to reach an agreement to end the trade war, which has been going on for more than a year now. Both sides have increased and added tariffs in recent weeks, affecting global markets and supply chains. But despite some disruption, there are also opportunities for businesses in Asia. Scott Hyder reports now from Bangkok.
With trade negotiations between the world's two biggest economies still a work in progress, China's close and reliant neighbors are feeling the impact. On the outskirts of Bangkok, Ratapon Labsisawat runs a houseware company started by his father. The medium-sized business is heavily dependent on China. Factories there supply raw materials Ratapon uses to manufacture products for his Thai customers. The trade war is costing him money, but despite that, he sees an upside.
I think there's benefit to be made. China may have all the material that I need, but here we have skilled labor who know the art and craft. We can export our products without going through China or worry about the trade war.
In one high-profile case, Thailand has actually won new business as a result of Chinese tariffs on U.S. goods. U.S. motorcycle giant Harley-Davidson announced that it's moving the manufacturing of its China-bound bikes from the U.S. to Thailand by the end of the year. This to avoid tariffs levied on imports of American vehicles. The company had actually opened a factory in Thailand before the trade war to supply the growing East Asia market. But an economic advisor to one of Thailand's largest companies warns of a threat not just to Thailand, but to the global supply chain if China and the U.S. can't settle their differences soon.
If trade war going to last longer, they're going to have the long-lasting changing of the direction of the supply chain, particularly for the big country like China. It seems to me that China now going to become more internalize their economy.
That means China will rely less on neighboring countries for materials and goods, producing more of its own. That'd be bad news for countries like Thailand. Its largest export market is China. The economy here relies heavily on its big neighbor to the north, so businesses could be forced to recalibrate their supply chains. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera, Bangkok.
And that is our show for this week. Remember, you can get in touch with us by tweeting me at @HazemSeeker and use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or drop us an email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. As always, you can visit us online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. Now, that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Hazem Seeker from the whole team here. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.